Good evening. So, tonight's class always in the memory of Yitzchak ben Yosef, and it is going to be for the floor Shlema for Masha Baschai, who hopefully will be watching, and for all the soldiers in Israel that need our blessings and protection and spiritual merits to keep them fighting strong and safe, and of course to all the hostages as well. Shira, if you can tell me how the image is now. Okay, so my friends, I'll start with a joke about this. Do you want to close the door right behind you? Thank you. There is this guy that wasn't so smart, and he had some issues, mental issues, and one day comes to his psychiatric doctor, and he has two huge bandages around his face. On his face, there are two big bandages. So, doctor, what happened to you? So he said, I was ironing my shirt with an iron, and the phone rang, and didn't realize, I thought the iron was my phone, and I answered the phone, the iron, and I burnt my face. Doctor said, oy vey, that's terrible. That's terrible. What? But what happened to the other side? Why is the other side burnt? So he said, the idiot, he called back again. 1 second. They're saying that my video is blurry. I don't know why that would be. But this, my friends, is the story of when you're both sides in your face. 1 second.
Working through your technical.
Yeah, they say that it's blurry on there. Hello, everyone that's watching on Chabad.org. I don't know if that helped. Possibly. There's always some technical issue. So today we're going to say the story of two brothers who, on two sides of the face. If you know the story of Yaakov switching his hands for Ephraim and Menashe, it's quite a fascinating story. Very fascinating story. But there's some major issues that are relevant to us today from this story, in how we identify as Jews, in how we look at our role in the world, and how we see our place in society, from the fact that till today, there's practical repercussions and practical implications from the way Jacob decides to bless his grandchildren, Ephraim and Menashe. So let's read the story together. Let's understand the story. Let's understand the emotional trauma of the story. Why it's such a tenseful moment in the life of Joseph. And then after we understand the story, we're going to understand the lessons for us of why we continue till today to switch around the order of the two children, Ephraim and Menashe. Okay, so let's start with the story. If you're watching on my personal page, I'm going to share my screen. You'll see the text. Maybe you won't see it. 1 second. Share the text from chapter 48, which is from this week's Torah reading. So in this week's Torah reading, we have Jacob is ill. Yaakov is going to soon pass away. And Yosef, his son, hears that his father is on his deathbed. So, chapter 48, Torah tells us it came to pass that it was said to Joseph, behold, your father is ill. So he took his two sons with him, Menashe and Ephraim, to go get a blessing from his father, their grandfather, before Jacob would pass away. Okay? We get it? When Yosef comes to Yaakov, they have a whole conversation about making sure that Yaakov should have a proper kosher burial. Very important verses. However, I skipped them over here because we're not going to talk about burial today. The chesed ve'emes, the kindness and truth that God asks his son, that Jacob asks his son to do to him. I happen to mention, if you watch my Facebook Reels on Sunday, I was part of two funerals, not one but two funerals. On the day that we read the daily Torah portion, which is the beginning of this week's parsha, where Joseph swears to his father to do a kindness and the truth to make sure his father has a proper kosher burial. Anyway, so he comes, he gets the blessing, and then Joseph says to his father, verse number 9, they are my sons whom God gave me here. So Jacob says to his son, bring them near to me so that I may bless them. Now, Israel's eyes had become heavy with age. On a simple level, what does this mean? Yaakov couldn't see anymore. He was kind of blind. And so, to the extent that he could not see, so he drew them near to him, and he kissed them, and he embraced them. Okay? So far, the story is good. However, two sons come, Yaakov says, who are they? Yaakov actually lost his Ruach HaKodesh for a minute. His divine inspiration left him for a little bit. He got worried, and then Yosef prayed, he brings them close, he sees them, he gives them a kiss, and he goes to bless them.
Why did they go?
What?
Why did they go away?
Why did who go? Why did divine inspiration go away? Because both of them had evil people that would come from them, from their descendants. Both Ephraim and Menashe would give birth to children, or great-great-grandchildren rather, that would be wicked. The kingdom of the north of Israel, Achav and Yehu, would come from Ephraim, and they would come from Menashe, and I forgot who. He would worship idols. I forgot his name now. He would build a house of idol worship. The name slips me at the moment. Would come from Ephraim.
And Joseph knew that.
Jacob knew that. Jacob did it. Jacob felt that. He understood that with divine intuition. And that's why when he wanted to bless them, the spirit of divine prophecy went away from him. Because of this evil that would come forth in future generations. Achav was a terrible king. If you know the history of the Jewish people. And the division of the two kingdoms of Israel, the north of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, Achav was a king that set up roadblocks to not allow any Jews in the northern kingdom to go to Jerusalem, to the temple. Instead, he built his own temples of idol worship. He forced all the Jews in the north of Israel, the 10 tribes, to worship idols. He was a very, very wicked man. I mean, we could talk about it for a long time, but that's not today's class. But that's why Jacob lost the inspiration. Anyway, but so he lost inspiration. And then the Torah tells us that Jacob gives a beautiful blessing. What's the blessing? Hamalach Hagol Osi Mikora, the angel that protected me and redeemed me from all my troubles shall protect you. He shall bless you to be like fish. Fish have no ayin hara, no evil eye. Many of you, I deliberately didn't put the verses in here because if I read them, I will get distracted for a half hour. They're very, very beautiful verses. I have to just tell you, we're skipping beautiful verses, but they're really a class of their own. I have some beautiful things to share with you, so don't worry. We're not going to walk away empty-handed. But the blessings we sing to our kids at night when we put them to sleep, these verses of the blessing that Jacob gives his grandchildren for divine protection, to be protected from the evil eye, truly beautiful blessing that Jacob gives his grandchildren. However, there's one problem. At the moment that Jacob is blessing his grandchildren with this beautiful blessing of protection from any evil, Yaakov switches his hands around like this, and he puts his right hand on the head of the younger son, Ephraim, and he puts his left hand on the head of his older grandson, Menashe. Now I should explain to you that in Judaism, the right hand is very significant. Whenever we do a mitzvah, we always do the mitzvah, if it's a one-hand mitzvah anyway, with our right hand. So for example, when we make the blessing on the wine on Friday night on Kiddush, right? Which hand do we hold the Kiddush cup? In our right hand. We make a blessing on the Lulav and the Esser. When we hold the Hanukkah candle to make a blessing on the Hanukkah candles, etc., etc., we hold the knife to cut the challah. We always do it with the right hand, and there's many reasons why the right hand is a sign of chesed, of kindness, but in general, right shows on dominance, on the more prominent hand, but in Judaism, right is always a sign of importance. In Judaism, the right is always a sign of importance. In fact, side note, if you ever look at a man's kapata, or I'm just getting distracted for a second, but if you look at my jacket that I wear in the morning, I actually have a little button like sewed in on the opposite side of the jacket. And that's because when I button my jacket, I wear a belt when I pray, I want the right side of the jacket to be on top of the left side of the jacket. Men's jackets normally button the other way, where the left is on top of the right. And because we're Chabad, you'll do everything different. We want the right side, which is more dominant. So there's actually a button sewn over here, if you can see it, so that my right side is over my left side. Okay, so Judaism, the right side is much more important than the left. So when Yaakov switches his hands around and puts the right hand on top of the younger son, Yosef is very perturbed. He gets very, very stressed out. And what happens? Let's read the text together, my friend. So Yosef, let's skip a few verses to verse number 13. And Joseph took them both. Ephraim, I should have read this first. Put Ephraim on his right, which was the left side of his father Israel, right? And he put Menashe at Joseph's left, which is the right of Israel, and he brought them near to him. But Israel stretched out his hand and switched them, and he put the right hand on the younger son, Ephraim, and put the left hand on the head of Menashe, who was the older son. He guided his hands deliberately, for Menashe was the firstborn. Okay, then is the blessing that I mentioned, Malach Hadol Osi. And then in verse 17, Joseph saw that his father was placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, and it displeased him. Now, the word displeased is a very poor translation, because in the Hebrew it says, Vayera be'enav. Vayera means it was bad, evil, frightening in his eyes. It was drought. It was bad in his eyes. So much so was it bad in the eyes of Joseph that Joseph did something that a child back then would never do. He actually publicly, in front of his kids, contradicts his father, and he goes and he switches his father's hands. Joseph holds up his father's hands to remove it from upon Ephraim's head to place it on Menashe's head. And Joseph said to his father, Lo chen avi, not so my father. For this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head. Now, before I give you the response, let's understand this moment. It's a lot of drama. And if you can know the context, there's like major PTSD happening to Yosef at this moment. Major. And it's not really funny. It's actually very scary for Yosef. What is Yosef so panicking about? What is Yosef panicking about? What? So Yosef is panicking because Yosef has seen how his father has his entire life tried to subvert, if you will, or to force the younger child to take precedence over the firstborn, the Bukhar, the firstborn child. We know in Judaism the firstborn has a certain dominance, a certain prominence in the family. And we see already 3 times in the life of Yaakov where he switches the natural biological order of things and makes the younger over the older. What are the 3 times? First himself. He takes the firstborn from his older brother Asa. Even before he's born already, he's fighting in the womb to stop his brother from being born. And then we know the story when Yaakov buys the firstborn from his brother, and he then tricks his father to pretend that he is the firstborn. That's the first time. The second time is with his wives. Leah is older than Rachel, and Yaakov loves Rachel, the younger, over the older. And he always puts her up on the pedestal and kind of ignores his other wife, the older one, Leah. And the third is in Yosef's own life. The firstborn, Reuven, is totally disregarded. And he puts Yosef, the firstborn of Rachel, who's much younger than Reuven, over Reuven. And we all know the scars that Yosef is carrying from the switching of family roles that Yaakov has done.
So it shows you that you have favorite in children.
Yaakov has favorites. And when Yosef sees this, Yosef says, no. We are not continuing this on to the next generation. We are not doing this. I am not allowing you have to understand, for Yosef to contradict his father, when his father said, go to Shechem and check on your brothers, he listened. And Yosef saying to his father, I will not, no, my father, don't do this. Don't continue what Yosef saw as a terrible mistake, a mistake of almost deadly consequences, where Yosef was almost killed as a result of his father's putting prominence for the younger over the older. I'm not going to allow you to do this to my children and put my younger child over the older and continue creating family feuds and drama and problems. And Yosef literally, physically lifts his father's hand and says, this one is the firstborn, put his hand over here. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what Yosef is feeling at that moment? His father is about to continue what is seemingly a terrible mistake that has only caused problems. He's about to continue it on to the next generation. What happens next? What happens next, my friends? Torah continues, the very next verse. So Yaakov responds to his son, Jacob responds. And Joseph says, verse number 19, his father refused and he said, I know, my son, I know. He says twice, I know. Why does he say twice, I know? Commentaries say, first of all, there were other things that he's saying to his son. I know who's the oldest. I didn't make a mistake. I'm not some, senile, bumbling, senior that doesn't know the difference in. I know who's older, and I know things that you don't know that I know. I know that you were sold, even though I said on Shabbos that there's a message you didn't ask. I know about Bill. I know stories about your brothers that you don't know. I know exactly all the repercussions of everything that you think I don't realize what happened. I know everything that happened. I know how you were treated because I made you more important than your brothers. Anyway, I know. The classic explanation is, though, I know who they are now. I know who's the firstborn, but I also know who will be in the future. I know. Therefore, he says to his son, he too, meaning the older son, Menashe, he will become a people. And he too will be great. But his younger brother will be greater than he, and his children's fame will fill the nations. Listen to these words of what Yaakov is saying to his son. I know, my son, I know. I know who they are now, but I also know the future. I also know what is destined to come out of these children. So yes, Menashe he's a people, he will be great. Great people will come out of him. Let me stop sharing the screen. Gideon, the one that will be one of the great generals of the Jewish people who will miraculously win a war, will come with the 10,000 soldiers, and 3,000 soldiers. They'll break the pitchers. And the great leaders of the Jewish people will come out of the tribe of Menashe. But I also know that from Ephraim will come even greater leaders. Yehoshua, Joshua, we had classes on him. The one that would be the successor of Moshe. The one that would stop the sun in Gibeon. Famous story, when we were in Israel, we went there, in Gibeon, they were in the valley, they were fighting a war, and the sun was starting to set, and Joshua realized that the momentum was on the side, and they were trying to hide in the darkness, and Joshua held up his hand, maybe his right hand, I don't know. He held up his hand, and he told the sun, Shemesh b'Gibeon Goyim, he said, stop, and the sun stopped. The sun in Gibeon was silent, the sun obeyed the command of Joshua, and the sun did not continue its orbit around the earth, and the day was longer. As a result of that, Joshua was able to win the war against the enemies that they were fighting in that particular battle. And the whole world knew that the sun didn't set. This was a miracle that the whole world saw. And the whole world is filled of praise and acknowledgement and recognition of the great miracle of Yoshua, of Joshua. And therefore he says, yes, I know my son, I know who's the firstborn, and Menashe will become a great people, and he'll have great people come out of him. But the true leadership of the Jewish people, the true greatness of the Jewish people will come not from Menashe, but from the younger son, Ephraim. And that's why I put my younger hand upon Ephraim.
Rabbi,
Yes.
why did he have to bless them? Is it because they were in Egypt?
Let's see. We'll talk about that. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next, my friends, is even more astonishing. You ready for the next line? Then, has Yaakov already blessed his grandchildren? He has. I told you, we didn't read it inside, but there's a beautiful blessing about being like the fish of the sea, being protected from the evil eye. But yet, after this experience, Yaakov then decides to give them another blessing. He blessed them on that day, saying, with you, with you, Israel will bless, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. And he placed Ephraim before Menashe. What does this mean? What's the second blessing? I already gave them a blessing. But now, I want to give them an additional blessing I didn't already give them. What's the new additional blessing that Yosef is giving his children they did not have before? That for all of the future of the Jewish people, Becha Yevarech Yisrael Lemar, that by you two children, Menashe and Ephraim, will all the Jewish people bless their children when they bless their kids. And when Jacob says this, he continues to say Ephraim, the younger one, before Menashe, the older one. And as Rashi tells us, with these words, when Jacob says, by you, with you, Israel will bless, mean that whenever someone wishes to bless his sons, they will bless them with their blessing, to a man saying to his son, may God make you like Ephraim and like Menashe. And indeed, my friends, the custom is that when we give the birchas habanim, when we give the blessing of a father to children, at the most special moments of a person's life. Some people have a custom to do it every Friday before Shabbat. They bless their children before Kiddush. Some have a custom to do it every year on Yom Kippur, right before Yom Kippur, before a wedding, at a special occasion. Let's see, I have the birchas habanim right here on the paper. What are the words that my father told me as I was about to walk to my chuppah? What are the words that I say to my children every year as we're about to open the Aron Kodesh for Kol Nidre? The holiest moments of a person's life. What are the words we bless our children? This is the text in all prayer books. This is in Ashkenazi Sfat. This is not a Chabad thing. These are the words. May God, for boys, may God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. The exact words that we just read in Rashi a second ago. Yisimcha Elokim, Ephraim, the younger one first, and like Menashe. If for a girl we give them a blessing for may God make you like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Rebecca, right? The four mothers. And then we say the priestly blessing, both for boys and for girls. Yivarechacha Hashem v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and watch over you. May God shine His face toward you and show you favor. May God be favorably disposed to you and grant you peace. This is the blessing we give our children. Some do it every single Friday. Some do it only on more special occasions. But if we're blessing a daughter, how do we start the blessing? May God make you like Sarah and Rivka and Rebecca and Rachel and Leah. We understand that. That makes perfect sense. Right? They're the matriarchs. These are four women who had sacrifice and commitment and dedication to doing everything they could to build the Jewish people. So it makes sense when we will bless a girl to be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. But how do we bless a boy? We don't say, may you be like Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't say you should be like Yosef, or like Yehuda, or like Moshe, and Aaron. None of them. We should be like Ephraim and Menashe. And there's two tremendous questions we need to understand. Two, and they both are tremendous. Number one is, even before we get back to the story we're talking about, who are Ephraim and Menashe? I know they're the biological children of Yosef and Asnas. But who are they? What is their role in the story of the Jewish people? What is their life about? They lived? Okay. What do they do? Abraham, we know. I bless you, be like Abraham. What does that mean? You should be kind. You should be hospitable. You should have a home full of guests. You should teach the world about God. If I bless you to be like Isaac, what does that mean? You should be righteous. You should be pure. You should be holy. If I bless you to be like Jacob, you should be a Torah scholar. You should raise beautiful children. You should have a happy family. Right? We know what it means. I say be like Yehuda. We know what he represents. He has a certain life image to him. He has a certain message, and we know this is Yehuda. Do we know any stories about Ephraim and Menashe?
Yes, they represent they didn't be jealous of each other.
Okay, that's true. I'm going to explain that. So give me a minute. Do we know any story, what they did? Do we know any moment, or what their life was about, what their personality was like, what's their character? Were they kind? Were they mean? Were they holy? Were they scholars? Were they righteous? We don't. The Torah didn't tell us. Now it's true. We know some medrash. We know that Menashe was the right hand man of his father. Menashe was the right hand man. He was a translator. When Yosef's brothers came, who was the man that was in charge of the house? Torah didn't say his name. But the rabbis tell us the man in charge of Yosef's house was his older son. Menashe was his right hand man. He was his translator. He was his assistant. He was the assistant, the chief of staff, if you will, of Yosef. His right hand man. Ephraim was a scholar. He sat alone with Yaakov. He was the one that came to tell Yosef that Yaakov was dying. Who was the one that came to tell? Doesn't say it in the Torah though. We read the verse together. What did the verse say? The opening verse of chapter 48. It just said, it was said to Joseph that Jacob is dying. Doesn't say in the verse who said. The rabbis tell us that the one that said was the grandson that was learning by his grandfather, who wasn't part of the family, he didn't work in the palace like Menashe did. He came to tell his father that your father is dying. But the Torah doesn't say so clearly. So I ask you a simple question. When we bless our children on Shabbat, on Yom Kippur, at a wedding, at a bris, at a special occasion, I was saying you should be like, not Abraham, not Isaac, not Jacob. You should be like Ephraim and Menashe. What do they represent? What is their life message? What am I saying to you? What is so special? What is the message? What is the, if you like a poster boy, the icon, the symbolism of Ephraim and Menashe, that they are the ones that became the future of all of the Jewish people, that Jacob says, when a Jew will give his child a blessing, what will he say? Like Ephraim and Menashe. That's a serious question. And then the second question, which is very much connected, in Yiddish we say Mela. It makes sense, doesn't it? But at least when Jacob blessed the younger son before the older son, and he said, I want to put my right hand on the younger because I can see prophetically that in the future, greater people will come from him. Joshua, who will stop the sun, will come from him. So I want to switch my hands. I can understand. But why, when we give a blessing today, are we continuing that injustice? Today, when we give a blessing, how do we give a blessing? We say God should make you like Ephraim, who's the younger one, and like Menashe, who's older, but we're mentioning him second. Why are we not doing it properly? Chutzpah. Okay, you're right, it's written in the books. But why are we doing that? The question is, why did Yaakov say, for all of the future of the Jewish people, B'cha Yivarech Yisrael? I mean, you're right, Yaakov said to do it that way. But why? The question is, why? Why would this be the way that Jews for the rest of Jewish history will bless their children to be like Ephraim and Menashe when we mention the younger before the older one? There's no reason for that. We're perpetuating the traumas that allowed for Yosef to be sold to the slave in the first place.
Even though they were born, we did.
Okay, so what you're saying is also going to mention that. But let's answer the first. What you're saying is good. I'm going to get this soon. You understand the questions are clear.
But he knew that the younger one was going to be better than the older ones, more important.
So Jacob understood that Ephraim would have greater descendants than Menashe. Fine. Right. So he decided to bless the younger one. But why is that now the future of all the Jewish people? Why now, when you give your son a blessing, do you mention the younger before the older? Why is Ephraim being mentioned before Menashe today?
This is more important.
Because E comes before M is what Steve said.
E comes before M. I hear you. You go with the last name, you know what I'm saying?
Sorry for the obvious.
And in the Hebrew, Aleph goes before Mem. But it's not even like they were twins or born 5 seconds apart. They're born a year apart. You understand the question? It's a very serious question.
Yes.
Make sure, number one is, what do they represent to us today? Meaning, so, the one question of why Yaakov put his hands and all that, he gives the answer. It still requires explanation. We still need to understand why he would do that. But, okay, Yaakov did what Yaakov did. What's really tremendously of importance to us to understand is why we today are perpetuating that. Why are we giving a blessing to our children today by two people that are basically unknown people in Judaism?
What good did they do that we
They didn't do anything. As far as the story of the Jewish people is concerned, they don't add anything to the story of the Jewish people. They're not part of the chain. I mean, obviously they're part of the 12 tribes, but we don't mention the 12 tribes. We don't say you should be like Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. In fact, we skip a generation, right? They're the grandkids.
Right.
So we don't say like Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. We don't even say like the tribes, the sons of Jacob. We say like the grandsons.
You have no story that
We have no story that we know of.
I thought you were leading up to a big story you didn't tell us about.
So Michelle I'm not leading you up to a story. I'm not leading you up to a story, you know why? Because I already told you the story. The great story that they did, we already said. What is a great story? And Vivi mentioned it because she probably heard me talk about this in the past. What is a great story? This is the first time in human history that two brothers are not jealous of each other.
But how do you know?
I'm going to tell you, listen. This is the first time in human history that two brothers are not fighting and not jealous of what the other person has. This is amazing. Let's go through human history. Go from the beginning. We have the first two brothers are Cain and Abel. And of course, God takes the offering of Hevel and not Cain. What does Cain do? Cain kills his brother Abel. That's not a very happy story. Didn't end very well over there. Who are the next brothers we know of? Famous brothers. Before Jacob. Isaac and Ishmael. And Ishmael tries to kill Isaac. Now he doesn't actually kill him. He was joking. He was mitzachik. He was pretending like a game. And he almost killed him. So much so that Sarah says, this guy got to leave or else my son will be killed. And Ishmael and Isaac are not, he almost killed him. Okay? Next generation, we have Yaakov and Esav. And Esav tries to kill his brother. Yaakov has to run away for his life, to escape for 22 years, hiding by his uncle in Haran. And when he comes back, Esav, according to some opinions, tried biting his neck off to try and kill him literally biting off his neck. And God did a miracle and turned the neck of Jacob to stone. Okay? So they're not very nice brothers, that's for sure. The next generation of brothers is Joseph and his brothers. And Shimon let me say, here's the dream, let's kill him. He says, don't kill your hand, let's sell him instead. He's a nice brother. He only sells him as a slave instead of killing him. It's not a great story either. And now for the first time, we find two brothers. And Yaakov is showing favoritism to one over the other. And guess what? Menashe is not jealous of his younger brother. And the younger brother, Ephraim, does not show any haughtiness or any pride or any ego over his older brother. This is two ways, by the way. It's not a one-way street. Both brothers are happy for each other. Menashe had his job being the second in command of his father Yosef. Menashe was not a yeshiva student. Menashe was not going to be a scholar. He worked with his father running the palace. He was his father's right-hand man. And he was happy for his brother, his younger brother, to be his grandfather's favorite, to get the blessing, the greater blessing, to get the right hand of his grandfather, to be told, your brother, is going to have children greater than yours. And there's no anger, there's no jealousy, there's no resentment, there's no feeling of he stole what's mine, none of that. He's happy for his brother. And on the other side of the table, Ephraim, the younger one, who's obviously a gifted student, who's sitting day and night learning from his grandfather, all the wisdom of the Torah that he's getting from his grandfather, is being told, you will become a great leader. You'll have great children. And there's no, look at me. I'm the guy in charge, I'm the rabbi. There's no sense of ego, no sense of haughtiness, no sense of pride, no sense of looking down or condescending look at his brother. They both stand with the same equanimous happiness and brotherly love they had before. And at that moment, Jacob is so overcome with wonderment, with amazement at his two grandkids, he gives them a whole new blessing. You understand? The first blessing, the angels that protect me should protect you and guard you and protect you from the evil eye. That was the blessing he planned to give them all along. That was the blessing he planned to give them. He gave them the blessing. But now when he sees, he switches his hands over them. If you look at the order of the verses, you see it clearly. Now that you have this perspective, it's beautiful, beautiful. It's truly beautiful. If you look now at the verses, he gave them the blessing in the verses, number 15, 16, etc. And then when Joseph moves his hand, and he says, no, the young will be greater and all that. And they don't do anything. All of a sudden on that day, he says to them, V'cha yivarech Yisrael. For all of the future of the Jewish people, you will be the icons that our children should live up to. You will be the poster boy. You will be the ones that will be mentioned before your sons walk to the chuppah, before they get the special day of Yom Kippur, before Shabbat, at those special moments, to recognize that to be a Jew is to be a loving brother, to be happy for your brother, to not be jealous of your brother, to not be condescending to your brother, not to show off to him, not to be angry, not to be jealous, but to love your brother, be happy for his success, to recognize your role, to recognize his role, and my role is my role, and your job is your job, and you are meant to be who you are meant to be, and I'm meant to be who I'm meant to be. That's a beautiful perspective. It's a beautiful perspective. However, that's not the only perspective. It's not the only one. Because even though that what I just said is truly beautiful, it really is, these two brothers are actually role models for each and every one of us. See, something very, very unique and special about Menashe and Ephraim that makes them distinct over the other brothers, and it is the classic explanation given in the commentaries, not what I said till now, but what Devorah mentioned, which is that what is unique about Menashe and Ephraim over the other 12 tribes? Exactly. The other 10 tribes were raised in holiness. They were raised in the holy land of Israel, in a pure environment. Actually, they were born in the Char, but they were raised in Israel. Their father with Yaakov, teaching them, training them, loving them, caring for them, etc. That's the story of Yaakov and of the other 10 sons. Ephraim and Menashe are unique. They were born in Egypt, made in America. You know what I'm saying? Made in America. These were boys that didn't grow up in the shtetl. They didn't grow up in Israel, in Kfar Chabad, in Bnei Brak, in Yerushalayim, in some holy environment learning yeshiva. They grew up in the capital of Egypt.
New York City.
They grew up in New York City. They grew up in the Bronx, playing knuckleball. I don't know if they played on the curb, pickleball. Whatever they were playing on the corner, on the street corners, right? Hanging out with their Italian neighbors till the sun went down. That's what they were, right? Going to Benny's. They grew up in the Bronx. The Lower East Side, maybe. If they were like, the outcasts, they grew up in Long Island, I don't know. But
West Side Story.
that's where they grew up. They grew up, and what was their environment? Who were the friends that they saw on the street? Who were the people they played with in the playground, in the sports games? Egyptians. Non-Jewish kids. They didn't have a cheder where they went to go learn, like a religious school, with the Rebbe teaching them. They grew up in a palace with a father that was working day and night, running a country during a famine. That's how they grew up. And yet, Yaakov looks at these two and says, who are they? He says to look at the verses. Who are they? And Yosef says, they're my children born to us, not to show them the marriage contract. These are beautiful Jewish boys that are still clear and strong in their Jewish identity, even though they grew up in Egypt, not under your care. And when Yaakov sees this is something amazing. These children, this is my guarantee of a future. This is my guarantee of a future. Now I know that Judaism will survive. What defines the greatest leaders of the Jewish people? In America, you have the founding fathers, right? The founders from us, from the Avos. What is a father? A person who's worried about making children. Other religions, they're building countries, or they're about building something. For the forefathers, it was about making sure Judaism would survive to the next generation. Now, and Avram and Yitzchak struggled terribly with this. Abraham was one of the most powerful, influential people. He struggled making his son keep his traditions. Yitzchak struggled to have his son Esau follow in his path. Yaakov was struggling with it. It was not easy raising all of his kids. And all of a sudden, Yaakov is looking at these grandchildren, born in Egypt, made in America, coming from a secular environment, so to say, with tzitzis, and I don't know what they were, on the kippah, with Jewish names, who know how to learn, who appreciate the holidays, who appreciate Judaism. At that moment, he says, wow, these are my sons. These will be for the entire future of the Jewish people. It's beautiful. So let's take this idea a step further. Even within these two Jews, Ephraim and Menashe, these two people who are meant to be, so to say, the icons of the role models of the future of the Jewish people, which is our story, there's two kinds. Because notice, this answer is beautiful, Ephraim and Menashe, but that doesn't explain why Jacob would switch his hands and put Ephraim before Menashe, and doesn't explain why when we today bless our children, we continue the story, and today we bless Ephraim, the younger son, before Menashe. Which means that even in the two children born in America, there's still two kinds of children. There's an Ephraim kind of Jew, And there's a Menashe coming. And Ephraim and Menashe are not exactly the same. It's not just two kids born in Egypt. There's a kid in Egypt called Menashe. There's a kid in Egypt called Ephraim. And they represent, metaphorically, symbolically, they represent two kinds of Jewish ways of ensuring our future. Two different paths of education, two different paths of identity, two different ways for Jews to self-identify and to be able to stay strong to our Judaism and to our heritage despite the culture in which we live. So let's look at these two names, Ephraim and Menashe. Let's see where they got their names, from why Jacob named one Ephraim and named one Menashe. What do these names symbolize? And let's understand what that means for us in America today. What does it mean to be an Ephraim-aware Jew? And what does it mean to be a Jew that has the identity of Menashe, And then maybe we'll understand why Jacob made the blessing to be that Ephraim would come before Menashe. Deal? Deal. So we're going to have to go back to our papers. We're going to go back to last week's story reading. And then we're going to read about the birth and the naming of these two boys. So the Torah tells us, we're going now to chapter 41. In chapter 41, in verse 51, Torah tells us that these two children were born. Joseph marries Asnas, daughter of Potiphera. They have two children. And Joseph named the firstborn Menashe, for God has caused me to forget all my toil and all my father's house. The word Menashe is from the word Neshani. Look in the Hebrew, you'll see it clearly. Why is he called Menashe? Ki Neshani Elokim, that's called Amali. God has caused me to forget, Neshani, all of my toil and all of my father's house. What does that mean? God has caused me to forget all of my father's house. Simply being successful. I'm forgetting being in Egypt, being in a place of affluence and a place of influence. It could be like, if someone's under the affluence of influence or something, right? He's under the affluence of alcohol, whatever. But so, in Egypt, in a place of affluence and a place of influence, Joseph feels he's forgetting his father's house. So he names his son Menashe to remind him not to forget. To remind him of the dangers of being possibly forgetting. And then, the second one, verse 52, the second one he named Ephraim. Why? For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Ki Hifrani, the word Ephraim comes from the word pri. What does pri mean? Fruit. Hooray, pri, ha'etz, right? The fruit of the tree. So, if fruitful means to give fruit, to be productive. I understand. I'm just showing the word that people should recognize the word. The root of the word Ephraim is from the word fruit. To be fruitful, to be productive, to thrive, to succeed in the land of my affliction, in the land of my suffering. So here we have two names. Two names. What do they mean for us metaphorically? Let's figure this out together. What does Menashe mean? I'm going to forget. So by saying God has made me forget, I'm worried. I don't want to forget my past. It's called nostalgia. It's called the Al-Tahaim. You heard of the Al-Tahaim? The South Americans never heard of the Al-Tahaim. You've heard of the Al-Tahaim, right? The old country, the old home. It's the nostalgia of when my parents did it. So when my parents did it, there's a certain, when you have a strong sense of cultural identity, it keeps you strong. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you aware. This is how my parents did it. And then we have Ephraim. Ephraim is a Jew who's not living off nostalgia and off of protecting the past from being forgotten. He's a Jew that is fruitful, who's productive, who's successful in the land of exile. If I could use sports language, Menashe and Ephraim is like defense and offense.
Football?
Defense. In every sport, you have defense and offense, right? It's not only football, in any sport. And when you're playing a game, you need people to protect the goal. If you're playing soccer or hockey, whatever, or football, you need defense. You need to protect your territory. And then you need offense. If you have no defense, you're going to lose. If you have no other goal, that's very dangerous. That's very dangerous. But on the other hand, defense alone doesn't win the game. You also need to score. You also need to actually have an offense to score. So we have two names. Two ways of maintaining a Jewish identity. One way is by remembering my past. By remembering when my parents did it, when my grandparents did it, the way I grew up, the way I was taught, the songs, the memories. And by remembering the past, it keeps me connected. It protects me from losing what I have. It protects me. I don't want to change. It protects me. Didn't work for you.
No, that's me.
Oh, that is you.
Yeah.
You're remembering what you have. You're protecting what you have. And then you have Jews that are Ephraim. They're on the offense. And they're going forward to build a world. To transform the exile in which we live. And to make it a home. Right? So which one is better? Which one is a priority? Which one do we need to focus on? We need both. That's why there's both Menashe and Ephraim. You need both. A Jew in exile, on one hand, can't forget our identity. If a Jew forgets where we came from, we won't know where we're going to. It's very important. It's very important to know our past, know our history, know who we are. If we don't know who we are, if we don't know those borders and those boundaries, we will cease to exist. But just to play defense alone is not enough. A Jew has to also play offense. A Jew has to play a game to conquer, to win, to transform our darkness, to be successful in the land of affliction. That's Ephraim. Ki Ephrani, God made me successful. I thrived. I didn't just survive, but I thrived in the land of my affliction. They say that the four sons, on the Haggadah, on the Pesach, they have four sons, right? Who are the four sons? The Chacham, the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son who's confused, and the son doesn't even know how to ask. So they say these four sons are the four generations that came to America. You have the wise son. They were the Jews, the first generation of immigrants that came from the old country, came from Eastern Europe. And they were committed to staying strong no matter what. And they would get fired every single Shabbos, because in those days you could work on Saturday. If you don't have a job in the sweater, the shmata business or whatever, to work in the factories on Shabbos. Sunday was a day off. And these Jews decided, I don't care if I have no income, if I don't have a job, I am not going to work on Shabbos. And there's so many stories of bravery, of heroism, of Jews that risked everything they have to maintain a Jewish life, even in the new country of America. I remember hearing a beautiful story about this Jew that every week would get fired. You go to a company, get hired, and they tell you, you're not going to come Shabbos, Monday you're getting what's called a pink slip. That was when you got laid off, you get fired as a pink slip. And one year it's a custom to decorate your sukkah. So one year this Jew that was fired every single week from a different factory, and every factory in New York, his family comes into the sukkah, and see decorated with like pink pieces of paper. Like all different shades of pink, and then they came closer, they realized that the wall of his sukkah was all the pink slips he had collected over a year of being fired every week. The whole wall was pink slips of being fired for keeping Shabbos. Tremendous heroism. Tremendous sacrifice to maintain an identity as proud Jews. Tremendous. But it's defense. And in some of these stories, there's another story of a guy that found in the drawer, like his father collected and kept, he passed away also, like a pile of pink slips. I think he wanted to be buried with it. His son, they found it, a pile like this, of his father, and there's a whole song about this guy that they found from his father, these pink slips. His grandfather, it's a song now about Shabbos that Lipa Schmaltzer has, about these pink slips. Jews that were willing to risk everything, to come home on Monday with no job, with no food, so they wouldn't give up on who they were as a people, as Jews. And that was the Chacham, that was the first generation, the wise ones. And what happens in the next generation? They grew up, and some of you could relate to this. They grew up and they rebelled against it. Why did they rebel? Because it didn't talk to them. It was hard. They would come home and say, oh, it's church is It means it's hard to be a Jew. And it was hard. They would do it, but it was hard. And so the second generation, who was born in America, said, we're not going to, we don't take this. And they rebelled against it. And they became secular. Of course, they still kept the holiday, they still showed up the Pesach Seder, but they started with rebellion. This is not for me. Comes the third generation of the third generation Jews. And these Jews, they still go to a Pesach Seder. They know that they're Jews, but they're totally confused. What is this? They have no idea what's going on. They remember their buddy would light Shabbos candles. They remember growing up with a Zaidi that would pray. And the father was totally secular. And on Pesach, they would go and the grandfather would read for 3 hours straight. And they all sat there waiting for Bubby's gefilte fish. Right? And that was the story of their Judaism. So they're confused. Like they know that somewhere in the past, these were rabbis that were once in the family, but they grew up in a secular home. And then the fourth generation, they don't even know what's going on. They show up and say they don't know. It's Pesach, this, or freeing the men, the women, whatever. You know, they're eating bread and matzah together. They know they have some wine, they have a cheer. They don't know Pesach, a story, religion. They don't know the family day. Like they show up with you understand the story? So defense alone is important, but if you're just going to play defense, you're not going to win the game. When Yosef came to Egypt, Yosef gives birth to 2 sons. What does Yosef do? The first son he names Menashe. The first thing Yosef says to himself is, don't forget that you're Yosef. You're not Safnas Paneach. You're not the viceroy of Egypt. Yes, you're wearing a crown. Yes, you have a palace. Yes, you have servants and slaves and maids and whatever. You're running a whole country. But that's not who you are. Don't forget the house of your father, Yosef. He's talking to himself by naming his child a name. And every time he would see his baby Menashe, he'd say, don't forget, you're a Jew. You're a Yosef. He had to put the line in the sand where his identity is not to lose not to fall. And only after Yosef put the line in the sand, then the second son did Yosef name Ephraim. Now that I'm strongly grounded, I'm strongly rooted in my identity, now I can go and try and conquer the world. Now I can try and bring my influence to the nation, try and have all the Egyptians be circumcised. Now I can share my Judaism to the world. But I can't do that if I'm not grounded in who I am. If I try and be like everyone else, if I don't have clarity in Jewish values, today there's so many Jews that want to share Judaism with the world, but there's one problem. They don't know anything about what Judaism really stands for. They don't know what Torah stands for. They've never learned Torah. They've never learned the Bible. So they're teaching Judaism, but they're not grounded in the truth of Torah. Yosef didn't make that mistake. Yosef says the first thing I need to do is Menashe. I need to set up strong protective measures that I don't forget my identity. Then Ephraim. Then I'll thrive. Then I'll be successful. Then I'll be productive. Then I'll be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Before Yaakov dies, Yaakov tells his son, and Yaakov tells all of us, for all the future generations of the Jewish people, that in order of sequence, you got something first, and something second, something third. So in order of sequence, yes, Menashe comes before Ephraim. But in order of importance, in order of priority, in order of what needs to be our ultimate focus and mission, is not just to play defense. Our ultimate focus and mission is to be Ki Hifrani Elikim, to find ways of being fruitful, of thriving, of growing, of being successful, of transforming the exile, the Egypt, the land in which we live, to being a land that's full of the awareness of God. That's the message that Yaakov is showing to his son Yosef by switching his hands around and putting the right hand, the more dominant hand, on the lower second son. Say, this son, not about age, this son, yes, it comes sequentially second. Yes, Ephraim is born second because you can't do outreach if you don't know yourself. You can't inspire if you're not inspired. You can't teach others if you haven't learned first. But in order of importance, what has to be the worldview of a Jew? Not to be sheltered and isolated, doing what we can to protect ourselves from the influences of the world. There are Jews today that live a life of isolation, of protecting themselves from the dangerous influence of society. And the influences of society are indeed dangerous. but they try and protect themselves from that. The ultimate message that Yaakov says is the way you'll ensure your children survive is the way Yosef had his children. How did Menashe and Ephraim remain proud Jews in Egypt? Because Yosef told them, you're different. Yosef didn't try and convince his kids you're like every other Egyptian kid on the block, because you also happen to have a Jewish name and you also happen to have a Pesach Seder where you listen to your grandfather read for 3 hours. Yosef raised his children to know, Menashe, that you're different, you're not like them, you have a mission in the world. You are the chosen people of God. You are not an Egyptian, you are a unique breed. You are God's chosen people. And therefore you have a mission in the world. And because Yosef instilled a sense of mission and of purpose in his children, that's why they were able to thrive as beautiful, proud Jews despite the influences of their surroundings. Because they had a sense of mission. Just defense alone can eventually be worn down. But when you're on offense, you're never going to get worn down. When you're trying to inspire, you don't get influenced. In Jewish law, I'm going on overtime, it's okay. So one more story. In Jewish law, there's a story. There's a halacha. That when you want to remove the salt from a chicken, when you want to remove the blood from a piece of meat or a chicken, what do? You salt it. Why are we not afraid that the salt will go out of the animal and then go back in? If you ever saw a piece of meat or a chicken being salted, it sits in the salt for a half hour, at least. So you put it into salt, and there's salt there, and there's blood there, the blood's going out, sitting in blood. Why do we assume that all the blood ran out, none of it went back in? So the halacha is, the law is, that when something is expelling blood, it can't also absorb. It's a fact. When you're just neutral, you can absorb. But when you're actively expelling something, because when you're throwing up, you can't swallow. Right? So you're throwing up, you can't drink. When the salt is making the meat expel the meat is not able to absorb blood because it's in the process of expelling blood. When you are actively recognize that you're different, and you're actively trying to be an influence on the world will influence you. Amen. And that's what Yaakov was saying to his grandkids. That's what Yaakov was saying to every one of us. Sequentially, Menashe is first, granted. I know, my son, I know that he's the firstborn. But I want you to also know that what your real focus and purpose and mission is to be, to be fruitful. Not just to survive, but to thrive in the land of your enemies. This is the secret of Chabad. This is what we have to all to be successful. So, it's a very beautiful story about the idea of thriving. I just was reading this now. It's a Hanukkah story. I know we're 2 weeks after Hanukkah, but the time of anti-Semitism is so relevant. This story happened a few years ago in a small city in Montana. Is there any big cities in Montana? I don't know, but there's a small city in Montana. In a small city with a very Jewish name. You know what the name of the city is? Not making it up. The name of the town is Whitefish, Montana. I don't know, there was actually a debate. They were going to name it Herring, Montana. And then the city council voted against it. Said, no, Whitefish is... No, I'm just joking. It's called Whitefish, Montana. That's the name of the city. It's a town in Montana. Whitefish, Montana. Jewish. Can't imagine more Jewish than the Whitefish. Whitefish. Maybe like schnapps. I don't know. Whitefish, Montana. And in Whitefish, Montana, a few years ago, there was a neo-Nazi march on Martin Luther King's Day, whatever. There was a neo-Nazi march in this town of Whitefish, Montana, that was allowed to go. And the governor came out to support the Jewish community, police presence. But there was a march. The Jews, the small Jewish community in Montana, big neo-Nazi march in Whitefish, Montana. So, what did Rabbi Brook do? There's a Chabad Shliach in Montana. The Chabad Shliach in Montana. Of course. Every state in America has a Chabad rabbi now. Well, we got some bagels and lunch. So, the police and the state was being very supportive of the Jewish community. The governor made a public statement against the neo-Nazi march, and he sent, state patrol, whatever, to protect the Jewish community. So, the defense is being done by the government. But the job of a rabbi, the job of the Jewish community is not to play defense. So his words. It's not to play defense, but to play offense. And so Rabbi Brook said, we need to do something to spread light, to spread awareness. So he started the Montana Chumash project to send the Chumash. There's 1,500 Jewish homes that he knows of in the state of Montana. He sent an English Kahas Chumash, it was a newly translated Chumash. To every, got some sponsors, including non-Jewish sponsors, to send an English translation of the Bible to every single Jewish home in the state of Montana. Understand? That's Ephraim. Menashe is never again. Anti-Semitism. And we're on defense against anti-Semitism. We're on defense against the Holocaust. Our whole Judaism is about not the Holocaust. It's an anti, what's her name? The famous Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss had a brilliant statement. She was a New York Times reporter until she left. She saw the anti-Semitism there. But she spoke. She's not religious. But she said that Jews can't just be the anti-Semites. That's defense. We have to stand for something. We need to know what we are. And that's the job of Ephraim before Menashe. That's our job, to make sure not only to survive, to be strong in our identity, to be strong in our self-confidence as Jews, but to be so strong that we can influence the world around us, to be like Ephraim, to be fruitful, and to grow the world in the awareness of God, and in truth, and in love, and in peace, to the coming of Mashiach, God willing, very soon. Okay. Good night, my friends. That is the story.